There is no business like show business. The lament of a new resident to Broward County. Dr. Buckingham opened the door of his Suffolk apartment Z103 to admit his patient. White-haired, he looked older than his fourscore years. For psychiatry as a speciality is injurious to the medical practitioner. It was February. A blast of cold air rushed in as the door was opened, and the bracing freshness of the morning brought a spring to the step of Dr. Buckingham's spirit. However, as soon as he admitted his new furry friend, his countenance became somber. The welcoming civilities were brief. Very soon the strange guest was sprawled out on the traditional antique red couch with satin cushions, spilling all the pent-up emotions of the year 2020. "I must let you know, Dr. Buckingham," said the guest, who had introduced himself as R.A.C. Kuhn, "that on behalf of my family and myself, we appreciate your personal kindness for making this consultation possible. The generous welcome of your colleagues in the Centre Village community has also been overwhelming. One could say that my life over the past 12 months has been overshadowed with several difficulties, particularly in New York. But now that we have settled in Broward County, I can see the daylight of better weather like an approaching train at the end of my tunnel." Dr. Buck, a title the well-off doctor reserved for himself, replied, "I know you nocturnal guys depend on the middle and upper-class households in order to maintain a varied and nutritious diet. Tell me about my old stomping ground in New York. How has it been for you and the family during COVID-19? "In one word, bad," R.A.C.C.O.O.N. replied. As the COVID-19 restrictions increased and incomes declined generally, people just didn't eat as well or as frequently as they used to. Funny how one could ascertain the horror of these circumstances by rummaging through the inferior quality of the items people dispose of in their garbage. Less meat and vegetables, he sadly concluded, which are important for us carnivorous idealists. Dr. Buckingham put on his best benevolent psychotherapist face, but before he could say anything, Racco, who had only paused for effect, continued, "But our younger kids missed the baby food, and whatever little there was proved dangerous and had to be avoided. The Oversight Committee on the Hill revealed that manufacturers knowingly sell tainted baby food to unsuspecting parents, like those from whom we access our daily meals, which showed a high level of toxic heavy metal and without any warning labels." "In times like these," intoned Dr. Buckingham, "we need a government that can step in and stop these abuses. When there are crises, it's always helpful if there is an adult in the room. Clearly, you have been stressed out with just living from one day to the next, and the pandemic has made it much worse." And then he went on to expound, based on his expert knowledge of the subject, that social distancing and lockdowns associated with COVID-19 had several casualties, not always obvious, such as increasing anxiety and mental illness. There is an amazing study by a colleague which shows a higher trauma prevalence of psychiatric disease among the orthopedic trauma patients during the COVID-19 pandemic than those seen at around the same time in 2019. In spite of the greater need for one another, we observe a higher rate of reported interpersonal violence in the 2020 patient cohort. The conclusion from these observations is that stress induced by the pandemic can place patients with mental illness at a higher risk for reckless behaviors, and therefore subsequent fractures. It's also a fact that injury from falls tended as a percentage to be higher in 2020 than in 2019. Racco explained and complained about policy changes that touched him closely, such as those related to the sensitive fur industry, which in Dr. Buck's opinion could also have set off anxiety. There is a plan to give federal attention to the importance of increasing the fur supply based on ladies' future popular evening choices when the social distancing mandate is all over. The various game commissions will soon indicate what new policies for hunting and preservation of wildlife are to be published. That is important for fur bearers, such as raccoons. For 40 years prior to 1891, about 500,000 of their skins were marketed annually from North America. And so for trade purposes, a dead raccoon is an important prize. Yet raccoons' lives do matter for the sake of the ecology. What generated fear in the Racco was ascertaining into which camp he would fall. Dr. Buckingham summed up the situation. The popularity and widespread use of raccoon pelts in the fur trade has increased the demand enormously. Racco assumed a stoic grit. Forewarned is forearmed, he said. And it was basically for this reason that I urgently departed New York for a simple and certain survival option in Florida. As for dietary concerns in a new location this far south, there is enough fruit, birds, reptiles, and insects available if we discover a way to cleverly flip latches and gain entry into the garbage containers in Central Village. My family and I would, however, have to be on the alert to avoid the occasional trap here and there. But we could perhaps enjoy a reasonable lifestyle and longevity along with other aging residents. Is there anything that you enjoyed in New York that you would miss? Asked Dr. Buck. Oh, certainly, said Rack. That special dessert for which New York is famous from Brooklyn to Penn Station. I shall miss the strawberry cheesecake from Junior's. There is something about the entertainment scene in New York from which my creative positioning as a hidden figure in the audience will be sorely missed. I rather fancy the shows on Broadway and all the glamour, glitter, and happy music that goes with it, not to mention the surrounding restaurants that have faded into memory because of traumatic viral transmission. Then Racco reached into the folds of his fur coat. I have a copy of a program to remind me of my last theatre outing in New York. It's going to be difficult with my regular activities now to keep it safe and dry. I'm asking you, Doctor, to keep it for me. I see you have lots of space in between Freud and Nietzsche in those medical tomes on your bookshelves. Please keep this as a reminder of better days before the hard times of 2020. It's the program for Mean Girls that played at the August Wilson Theatre before the lights finally went down a year ago. It's based on a story by Tina Fey.